All right, guys, now it's time to take the lights down. The season's over, the customer's ready to remove them. When you get to the house, you probably didn't install these lights. We do over 400 houses, so likelihood of you putting the lights on this house, very slim. So we have a system put in place. When you arrive to the house, the first thing you're gonna do is you have your lead tech and your assistant tech. The assistant tech is gonna begin by taking photos of all four sides of the house. This lets us look at the lights. It gives us the ability to draw the map for the lights, but it also gives us a profile for the customer, so if they want future services done, we know how many windows they have, so on and so forth. Now, as the lead tech, what you're going to do is you're going to start assessing how the lights were installed. Okay, so first you'll find out where the plug is. Typically the plug's near the front door. That's not always the case, but that's why you're looking for it. In this case, it's right by the front door. And then I'm going to follow my extension cords around. I can see there's extension cords going to the pillars. I can see that there's extension cords going down here for lights. And I can see that there's extension cord going all the way along up the gutter to my roof lights. So that's where we'll start with the roof lights. Begin removing the roof lights. One strand at a time, and then at which point your assistant tech will label the strands in the order that you label them, so that when you make the map, the number for that strand matches with what's on the map. When it comes time for labeling the strands, we use these little zip ties that have an area for you to write on. Okay? The first strand is 1, and it gets labeled right near the male plug. That would be the same for the extension leading to it. The next strand would be 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth down the line. When we're making our zip ties, and some guys will pre-write these out, or you can do it as you go along, but on these zip ties, there's a little area for you to write a number. So that'll be for our first strand. The next strand is, they're differentiated by an extension cord. So it's pretty obvious. You'll see as they come down. When the first strand's down, there'll be a long extension cord going to the second strand. That will be the beginning of strand 2.
So I'm taking exterior photos of all four sides of the house with the lights on, so the techs can just easily see exactly where the lights go, but our maps will indicate exactly where the lights go. So it's just another tool to use in your arsenal.
So like I said, it's the lead tech's responsibility to see how all of the lines were run. So in this instance, this house has got a lot of different lights. It's got a lot of different strands going on. So before I totally start removing, I kind of want to find my end and work my way back to the beginning. So I know where power starts. Now I want to see where it stops. So I can see that this tree was probably the last thing wrapped. It has an extension cord that went to the ground lights. And then I'll follow this back because I don't want to have any hiccups when the time comes to start labeling everything. I want to know what to tell my guy what to label, right? So one thing that's really important is that when we do our installs, we always have a bulb at the peak, so you remember that. We want to make sure that that is marked in some way or another. So if it wasn't marked during the install, which it should have been, but if it wasn't, this is our last chance to mark it before it goes into the bin. It's important to mark the peak bulb because that way you know the line will fit perfectly. Exactly. You'll have a bulb on the peak and the rest of the bulbs will go exactly where they need to go.
The start and finish will line up.
Correct.
At the end. Cool. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to pull this off and just double check. It should be marked. It is marked by, you can see that it's clipped. So we don't have to start from there. So if you want to go ahead and start removing the roof lights.
This is a moderately complex install, so it's easy to get confused if you just start unplugging everything and pulling it. So the guy who is essentially making the map has got to have a good read on where all of the lines are going and how they're run. So I know that, you know, these ground lights plug into my main extension cord, and I know that they finish those trees. And I know that there is an inline off my main extension cord that powers these bushes, right? And well, the columns are plugged in off the main extension cord as well. And then I know that this tree is lit up by an extension cord that runs to the ground lights. You don't want to rush through it. I mean, it's tempting to want to get to the house, rip everything down, throw it in the bin, and get on to the next one. But you have to take your time. You have to slow down. You have to assess it because you don't want to make any mistakes, because you might not be the person installing it next year. You might not even remember if you are when it comes for next year. So we want to make it so that anybody can come and do the install and have it be just the way it's supposed to be.
When you are uninstalling, so this is an inside branch wrap up about 18 feet, 6, 12, 18. When you're doing an inside or removing an inside branch wrap, you're just looking for the empty female. So that's where you want to start. So in this particular instance, I could see I already walked around the tree a couple different times and I found I got one open female right here. So that's where I'm going to start removing them.
Okay, so now we're gonna start removing the roof lights. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my power back off now. We don't need it anymore. Okay. I'm going to remove my extension cord, which we installed properly hidden behind the gutter. This was my ground lights. I'm going to leave it just like where it was plugged in. I can come back to it. Now I'm not going to yank on this. I'm not going to pull on it. I don't want to cause any damage to the customer's house. So I'm going to use my water-fed pole with my hook on it to carefully remove the line. Again, don't just start pulling. You can damage the line on sharp pieces of the gutter, right? And then you can start to assess at how difficult it's going to be. Some will come right down, some will be a little bit more stuck. You can give a little bit of a tug, but you don't want to be cranking on it, right? So this gutter I know has a form of gutter guard in it, so these are going to be just a little bit more difficult to remove than if there was no gutter guard in there. Gutter foam, same, right? There's another method. You can hook behind the line and lift up. Okay? Want to be careful with that line. You don't want it whacking into the windows. So we're right at the end of line 1. And I know that I can see my plug here. That will be my extension up to the second line. So what I'm going to do is try to loosen this up. And I'm taking my time. And in the instance, I may have to ladder up there. In a perfect scenario, you get everything off of the pole, but sometimes you're going to have to climb up there. So here we know that this is the end of line 1. I know that this extension here is the beginning of line 2. So going up to line 2, I'm going to check my peak bulb, make sure it's marked. So I'm not just going to whack it. I'm going to take my time, remove it. It looks from here, I can see that it's cut. To help me aid, I can give everything a little tug. I'm going to take my care. They're going to touch the window sometimes, but we don't want them to whack against the window. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're tugging, remember that they can take a little bit of a tug, but you don't want to force it too much. If it starts giving you too much of an issue, you have to stop and you have to reassess how you're going to try to remove it. You get a strand around the gutter. Take your time and get it around the gutter, because those gutters are sharp. They'll cut the line, they'll put microscopic little cuts in there, which will compromise the cord, and you won't see it with your naked eye. You got to be careful. Same there. So this portion of the house we know is strand 2. is got the lights going back on each side down the gutters. We're gonna have to climb up there a little bit to get better leverage so that we can safely remove the lights without causing any damage to the lights or the customer's home. We were able to remove these lights without getting the ladder. Like I said, in some instances you're gonna have to get the ladder. In some instances you're gonna take that extra few minutes, finagle your lights, find a way with the right push. They pop right out. These lights are designed to come out easily. So in that instance, I was able to remove them without having to pull out a ladder, which is ideal, right? But if you have to get a ladder, you get a ladder. So we're gonna stop the removal for a moment to wind up and label our strands so we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, right? I know that I have 2 strands down. I'm gonna start with the second strand, work my way to the first. That'll be 1 and 2, then I'll go back and remove more. We start with our female. And you're gonna go about 2 bulbs down, okay? And then you just keep right on top of itself. We're not gonna wind it up like an extension cord or a rope. We found that when you wind up the strands this way, it's the easiest for reinstall. So I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. I've got a buddy here. So I can, he's up in a tree, so I can label these. Or if he gets down and he's ready, then I can have him label them. But in any regard, I know what strand is what right now because I haven't gone too far ahead. So one thing that I've been doing lately is I've got my main extension and my first line is I'll just leave the timer plugged into the main extension. I'm still going to label it, but this is just another marker that, hey, this is the first thing that gets plugged in. So the specific process for balling up a mini light is you want to try to untangle it. These are commercial grade mini lights. They can take a beating, but we still want to treat them with love and kindness. Same as like we did with the main strands, you're going to start with the female. You start with the female because when you're doing the install, you start with the male, right? So it makes it easier for the install. So everything you do during the install, you're thinking about the takedown. Everything you do during the takedown, you're thinking about the install.
So that makes sense, Ryan. When you're balling up with the female, the male's going to be exposed.
Correct.
And when you think about plugging stuff into an outlet, what needs to go into an outlet?
The male.
The male. So you want to make sure the male's exposed at the end.
Correct. So you start with the female, wrap it around your fingers a few times. Once you get it started, you can stop, keep that female tucked in there, and wrap around that. And it doesn't have to be a perfect sphere or ball, but you want it just to be nice and tight. And we've found that if you can keep going in a circular motion, it helps with the reinstall because who knows what you're wrapping. Maybe this strand's going to go on a bush next year. It came off of this tree. Maybe it goes back on this tree. Who knows? But in a circular motion, it allows you to twist the ball while you're installing. And as opposed to if you were to just wrap it up and make it look like a donut, which works also, but this just seems to be the best. You start the third strand. The same way you started the first. See how easy it comes out sometimes. It's not always going to come like that. If you start feeling too much resistance, you got to stop. But if you're not feeling any resistance, you can go ahead and remove it. All right, so now as I'm taking this down, here's something maybe I didn't see when I was doing my first walk around, but I see a plug there. So that's an inline that tells me that this second peak and garage are another line. So I'm going to try to do my best to get that unplugged. But it also tells me that my peak bulb has got a plug right next to it, or an inline, right? So it should be marked, but I also know that it's got a little plug, and that's pretty standard. That's how we install. So that was cut. I know my peak bulb was marked. Sometimes when you're doing this, the strands will come down together. And if that happens, that's okay. You just got to slow down a little bit and make sure you keep an eye on what's happening. Sometimes a little tug will get it to unplug, sometimes it won't. So it did, which is good. That's what we wanted. This finishes the third line. Fourth line, my peak bulb's cut. In other instances, you can count the bulbs too. But we want to just make sure that that's cut. Now I'm going to slow down because I know I'm getting near the garage side. And I don't want all that stuff to fall on someone's car. So now we've gotten around to the garage side and I can see that we have some cars parked here. To mitigate any risk to damaging the cars, I'm not going to yank the line down. I'm going to go nice and slow and lower it one bulb at a time. And then I can direct the bulbs so they're not smacking into the car. I can have my partner come and help. And now together we can not hit the cars. See how Scott pushes them up into the gutter? And you can control the strand so it's not coming down on top. All right, moving along with the takedown. We just finished removing all of the mini lights. When you take the mini lights down off of any tree or bush, you want to keep them right next to it until you make your map and you can put them in the bin. Right, so if you go along the line, you'll see each bush that had mini lights on it has got the appropriate number in front of it. Likewise with Big Daddy here, this tree had 21 strands, so there's 21 balls of mini lights right there. Now we'll go ahead and, and the pillars each had a strand, so you'll see a strand next to the pillars. So that way when you're making your map, you can take a picture of everything that had mini lights on it and put a little number count so that whoever installs it next year knows how many to use. The mini lights are generally good for a few years, but sometimes they do go bad, so if you have to replace it, you'll already know. Or if when you open the bin and it's short, you'll be able to replace it. Now, we're going to label all of our ground extensions and strands. So we know our timer started up here. We know our main extension went along and up the gutter. So when I start my ground extensions, when I start to label them, we start with 10. So anything on the roof starts with 1, anything on the ground starts with 10. And then unless you have 10 strands on the roof, then you would start with 20, okay? So this is the first one, it plugged in right there. We'll mark it as 10. Okay, and then we'll still follow our main extension came this way. We know that these strands plugged into the pillars with inlines. And we've got a little extension here that went to our ground lights, so we'll mark that as 11. Now this extension is about 4 feet long and it ties into the ground lights, so I'm just going to keep those connected. But to be safe, I'll put another number 11 at the beginning of my ground stakes, just in case they come unplugged. We'll follow our ground stakes around. We had an inline here that went up to that tree. We'll mark that 12. And I can go ahead and unplug it at this time too. I don't want to wind this one up with these lights because they'll get tangled when I try to undo them. So that's why we number them and separate them. And then I know my last extension was all the way over here at the end of the ground lights. That one will be number 13. So it's going to be tempting to want to wrap this up with the ground lights. Don't do it. Just label it and unplug it. Follow the map. Okay, that's that. Now we'll wind those up. And then for that, I'll show you quickly how we wind up the extensions, especially the longer ones. Because it's kind of like winding up an extension cord, but it's a little different. So this here is our longest extension. We're going to get it out from where it's at. We're going to be gentle to the landscaping and the bushes. We don't want to hurt mom's flowers, you know. Be as careful as you can. Sometimes leaves are going to fall and stuff. I'm not saying take all day, but you want to be careful. Okay, now same deal with everything. We start with the female, right? So that's the very end of the strand. I'm gonna wind mine up like this, just like you would if you've ever wound up an extension cord like this or rope. It's the same. The only difference is when I get to the very end, I'm not gonna cinch it down. I don't want this to be all super tight and all spun out. So I'm just gonna give it one little wrap or one little wrap around, and then that's good. I want it to kind of be loose. It's labeled, we know what it is, and then that'll go into the bin with extension cords. So we just got done taking down all the roof lights, and how do you want to put them in the bin, right? So what I like to do is we had 4 strands. I always like to start with the lowest or the highest strand and end with the lowest strand, so that when you come next year, the first strand that's going up is the first one you're pulling out. So in this instance, this bin goes 4, 3, 2, 1. Do you have to do it like that? No, as long as the strand number matches what the map says, that's fine. But I found that this way kind of saves you some time and makes life a little bit easier.
As far as wrapping up yardstake lights, it's pretty much the same way you wrap up the roof lights. They can get tangled, but you just wrap them up as easy as possible and try to put them in like a separate bin so it's not with everything else.
That would be the same for ridge clips as well. So these are like specialty clips.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be in their own bin. So now for extensions, now we're going to go ahead and put away all of our extensions and our mini lights. We know they're going to go into a third bin. Obviously we try to use less bins, but in this instance it makes more sense to use the extra bin. What I like to do is I like to take my extension cords and put them on the bottom, and then put my mini lights on top of them. So like these are all labeled. This is a little shorty guy. Make it nice. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. You're not going to worry about tangling that up. And now we already, we've got our mini lights in front of each tree. We've taken pictures. We know what the count is for each tree and bush. We can go ahead and put all the mini lights into that one bin. So I'm taking the pictures, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly edit the photo of each bush or tree that has lights on it using whatever my phone's editing software is to indicate how many strands were on that bush or tree. At which point it's you know, we've got a record of it. We can go ahead and put the lights away. So whenever you're doing a house with ground lights or a lot of extensions, what we like to do is find the house on Google Earth and do a screenshot, and then draw your maps that way so you have an aerial shot. It allows you to cover more ground. So in this instance, I found this house we are at on Google Earth, and I will take a screenshot of it and then edit it that way.
So when we're labeling our bins, we just want to put the last name first of the customer and then the first name. So in this particular instance, we got Mixer Scott. And then we got 3 bins in total for Scott Mixer's house. So we got 1 of 3, bin 1 of 3, bin 2 of 3, and bin 3 of 3. So when you're taking them from the shelves next season, you know that they have 3 bins, so grab all 3 bins. In addition to that, if you want to come over here, this is just extra security. So when we first started off, we always just label it. You don't have to write them as neatly, but this is just in the event that this one falls off, it's just backup. So these ones never fall off. And so you'll see them on each bin in it. So I just put the last name, 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3. That's how you label your bins. And then when we get back to the shop, our mapping system as far as what shelves to put them on, we'll also put the bin location in here. Sometimes our mapping strategy for when we store bins changes each year, but you will when we get back to the shop. We don't know the bin location just yet. But you'll put the bin location on each of the ones on the outside.
Yep. Okay. So what I've done here now is I've got a aerial shot of the house, and it shows how each line and extension cord is ran, and it's labeled. I use different colors to differentiate the lines, but the numbers are what you're going to look for in the bin. I'd say it's a rough idea of how it should be. It's not perfect. We're drawing a map on a picture using your phone. So you have to use your best judgment when doing this. Landscape lights run the landscaping, right? As long as that extension cord gets to the tree, that's what we need. It doesn't need, there's not a huge science to it. So for Scott already got pictures of the 4 sides of the house. But for drawing the map, I'm just going to take a couple pictures and get it done while he's packing everything up. We do take the photos with the lights on the house because that's the first thing that you do. If for some reason you messed up, you can still draw the map and make it so that the job can be completed.
So we just packed up everything, doing a final walk around, making sure we didn't leave any equipment behind. Bins are in there, and we didn't make much of a mess on the sidewalk, but we just kind of do it as a courtesy. And we're gonna go ahead and just blow off the sidewalk and all the mulch and make it look clean.
All right, guys, so that wraps up the takedown. We just want to touch a few points just to recap. You want to make sure that you label your lines, make your map, upload it. You want to make sure that you clean up after yourself so any Christmas light debris is picked up. You want to make sure that you clean up any mess you make by kicking around the mulch. Be respectful to the client. These people take care of us. We want to take care of them, right?